Good afternoon. This is Paul Bangiola, and welcome to the latest edition, May 31, 2026, of Three Blowhards No Waiting. This podcast is dedicated to the proposition that three blowhards who strenuously disagree with each other can do so civilly and maybe even in a way that provides a little bit of education to the audience. Now, today I am with my friend and longtime colleague, Paul Mulshine, senior columnist, retired from the Star Ledger, one of the most prominent conservative columnists in the United States. And as far as I know, the only conservative columnist to project the victory of Donald Trump in the Republican primary in 2016 when the field was full. And I'm also joined by Professor Emeritus, retired from Ramapo College, professor in economics and finance, very distinguished, uh, I believe, conservative to libertarian, Murray Sabrin. Professor Sabrin, welcome.
Good to be with you guys.
Okay, so the first thing we want to talk about, we've got four subjects we're going to talk about today. Mr. Mulshine wants to weigh in on the impending doom facing us as the World Cup soccer tournament descends upon New Jersey and our inadequate infrastructure. Mr. Sabrin Professor Sabrin's got a few things to say about our catastrophic debt creep and where we are now. And then all three of us are going to weigh in on what we think about the latest debacles in the Trump administration with the slush fund settlement of $1.7 billion, which just got knocked down by a federal court, and the renaming and then the unrenaming of the Kennedy Center. So, Mr. Mulshine, tell us what's going to happen when the World Cup hits New Jersey next week.
Nothing is going to happen. They're going to be disappointed because they're going to try and blame it on the Ebola. We went through this with Ebola um, in 2014, and it did. They said all sorts of doom was going to happen, and it didn't happen. I wrote a column on that I just republished because that it hasn't changed. So that's going to be an interesting thing to watch, because you're going to see the media, my fellow members of the media, trying to drive the people into a panic over a soccer game. And I suggested somewhat facetiously that what they ought to do is to curb the spread of the virus. Don't don't let don't let the players touch the ball. Now, of course, in soccer, the players don't touch the ball, which is the big flaw with soccer. That's
In
why soccer.
soccer, they thought of that already.
Yeah, they started that 150 years ago, and no matter how hard I try, I can't get interested in it. And what about you? Do you have any interest in soccer?
When the World Cup comes around, and it's a little bit exciting, but I'm with you. It's a long. They got two long halves and not enough points scored.
Yeah, and yeah, the one they have in the last, I think it goes to one nothing going into the overtime, and you're like, what kind of a game is that? Just add 2 feet in each direction to the goal, and your scores would be like 9-8, it's like baseball.
Well, if you cut the field in half, it gets to be a lot more exciting game. You got a lot more players in a smaller space. You got a lot more scoring, but nobody asked me for my opinion on that. I think I
Yeah,
just
but anyhow, when it comes to a more serious topic is the Ebola virus, because we get nothing. Well, people are saying it was awful that Trump pulled us out of the World Health Organization. Well, not necessarily. Like you may remember a couple of years ago, they shut down Lake Hopatcong for the entire summer based on the threat of what was it? Green, based on the threat of
oh, an
algae,
algae bloom.
based on an algae bloom that wasn't there. I went up there twice. There was no algae bloom. Um, but they relied on the World Health Organization numbers to shut down Lake. It was a horrible thing. You went up there, it's this nice lake, you could go swimming, you could go rowing. I mean, they were saying, well, if you're going rowing, don't touch the oar, kind of. I mean, it was just an awful thing. And the World Health Organization, basically created a lot of non panic, just like global warming. you know, I mean, I don't believe in that global warming is going to make us all buy electric cars. They do. And one of the great things Trump accomplished was he basically just said, well, we're not going to do that global warming nonsense. And boy, are they, the liberals think we're going to get back in and we're going to have gas ration. Oh, they're real excited
Well,
because gas rationing may come in.
no, it's
Liberals
just
love rationing.
well, it turns out that clean energy is actually very inexpensive when it's implemented,
And it's
and
not very clean.
well, windmills are clean and solar panels are clean. Once they get in place, they last for 25 years, and it's very inexpensive. And
Oh, it's not
what will
inexpensive. They subsidize it by
now
hundreds of
that's you got
billions.
to that hobby horse you got to get off because China's now at 50% clean energy sources from all different sources, and it can be done. And once you have and basically the other thing is that people are going to be driven to electric cars, but it's not going to be by global warming. It's going to be by gas and oil prices that the cars are just so much less expensive to run. That's if the data centers don't drive the cost of electricity out of sight. But there's just a regular supply and demand that's going to work in favor of electric cars as we go forward. It was a toss up when cars started as to whether there was going to be a different source, whether it was going to be electric power or even steam power instead of gas engines when they started. And it was kind of, a horse race there for a while.
High in the sky. The fact is, how would you get rid of gas? You'd have to just make it even twice as expensive as it is now. Because if you leave it at the current system, people aren't going to stop using it. I'm certainly not. My cars, my fine collection of cars from the 20th century. I actually have a car that was built in 2000, and I like it. I'm not going to give it up. I mean,
Well, I, I'm a
nobody.
I'm the liberal with the solar panels on my backyard shed that generates electricity. And you know what I drive? A 2010 Ford Explorer, which I love, which I love like second only to my children and grandchildren, because it's great. And when you have gas in a tank, you have something called potential energy. It can sit there for 4 or 5 months and you can go out and start up that car and drive away. And it's hard to do that with other kinds of energy. So
Well,
anyway,
there's
you
some good
got
technology out there, but like
well, you got to
those
be open
plug-in
to the
hybrids.
technology. The technology's developing in electric cars too.
Man, basically it's stalled. You
Yeah.
got to put an
Now
electric motor in, and
we're blocking $7,000 electric vehicles from China from flooding the United States market, which they have. But we've imposed such tariffs on them, we've treated it as a national security issue. There's a sub $10,000 electric car that China's ready to sell. That's what would that do to a world where like every car costs $50,000? But
Well, the
again,
anyway,
problem,
high in the sky. Oh, Murray, you weigh
well,
in.
the problem, again, I haven't looked at the Chinese cars, but at $7,000 or whatever the price is, they've got to be really tiny. And the American people are no longer tiny, given the obesity problem we have in the country. So they're not going to fit into a $7,000 electric car. They'll tilt it over if,
well,
depending
Chinese
on what.
people aren't tiny either, but
Well,
that's
but the point is, here's the real point, and Paul Mulshine and I agree on this. Let the market decide. In other words, let people decide what they want to drive. I mean, I I I think hybrids are the way to go. And from what I remember reading years ago, hydrogen cell cars. Honda has been in working on that for a long, long time. They're probably the cleanest type of energy you can get is hydrogen cells because I think they emit H2O. So
well,
again,
it's interesting that you say that. I think
yeah,
that
I
I
mean, I
think that
remember
the
reading
market
articles
is
about that.
speaking in favor of those cars right now.
Yeah, yeah, I mean,
Ford basically abandoned their giant electric
yeah.
Ford F-150 Lightning. They abandoned that. GM abandoned the electric car program. The country just isn't ready for a fully electric car all the time.
Well, we've had a revolution in the automobile industry. I bought my first SUV in the mid '90s, more than 30 years ago. And before then, SUVs were driven; they were few and far between. It basically has replaced the station wagon. And this is, I think, from my perspective, and I think Paul M's perspective, is that the people in Washington think they know best how to run an industry with subsidies, with grants, with a whole host of mandates. And that's not the way you get a good economy. A good economy is run on supply and demand
How,
and risk taking. The entrepreneurial spirit is alive and well in America. We've been binging on previous shows of Shark Tank. And it's amazing the products people come up with that get monetized and commercialized by the sharks. And some of them that don't get commercialized, they go out and raise the capital and they become big hits. Some companies go by the wayside. That's the nature of a free market economy. It's called profits and losses and meeting consumer demands. If you can't meet consumer demands, you're gone. And look at all the airlines that have folded in our lifetime. I mean, at least a dozen airlines have folded, and we have a relatively thriving airline industry, even though we have a lot fewer. And we see this in industry after industry. We have streaming services now. We didn't have it, 25 years ago, 20 years ago. That's going to continue. And so, again, the evolution of American business never stops. It's an ongoing process. And the people in Washington should just go home, mow the lawn, have affairs, whatever they do in the world that they live in, and
Mary, when
buy
we
some
talking
gold bars
before,
or get gold bars like Menendez did, and
well,
leave the rest of us alone.
how about if the President of the United States decides to buy stock in, say, Palantir, and then grant a government contract to Palantir, driving his own personal stock up, like, say, within 30 days of those purchases?
Well,
Similar thing happened with Intel, where the government invested in Intel. The president had the country invest in Intel and take Intel stock back. And I think he's got the magic share where he has control of a vast proportion of Intel stock by virtue of, I guess, presidential fiat.
I'm glad you brought that up, Paul, because tomorrow I'm releasing on June 1st the Declaration of Reindependence of all the grievances that, from my perspective, against Washington. And one of the grievances, the federal government taking equity stakes in corporations, which sets a precedent for a future Democratic president to take equity interest in housing, insurance companies, all the things that they want big government involved in. And Trump and his people are not strategic thinkers. They think because they think it's a good idea to do this, that it won't have any long-term repercussions. This is going to be horrible for the economy if a Democratic president is elected in 28 or 32 and there's a major financial crisis. They're going to say, okay, the free market has had the opportunity. We need more government involvement. We need New Deal 2.0 and Great Society 2.0. And before you know it, the federal budget is going to be 10, $15 trillion a year.
Well, you
and
had,
not
I
only
think,
that, but
go ahead,
we
Paul.
were talking before about me and Mary, how Trump moans about how we need to cut taxes and we're spending too much, and he has never, and he just blew up budgets as big as Biden did. About each one, I think, contributed about 7 trillion
Yeah.
in spending.
Oh,
And
he's in his own league. He's in his own league.
well, Biden was in that league too.
No, he
Biden,
was,
and they both blamed COVID. That was a
well,
classic.
Biden, Trump was COVID. He blew up the budget on COVID and then blamed Biden for what he did on COVID, and that created inflation that Biden inherited. But anyway, without getting into that too much, I think both of you make very good points. I'm not sure that the problem, obviously the problem here is the hypocrisy of those who criticize only Democrats, and then when
Right.
Republicans have come in and done it at a scale that's unfathomable. I mean, there was a scandal suggesting that Joe Biden took money from Burisma that nobody ever proved anything, and his son had a job on the board of an oil company that did business with Ukraine, and they were talking about $1 million or two, and now they're talking about $1.7 billion in
Yeah.
a slush fund that's going to be created so that President Trump can reward the people who already pled guilty and then he pardoned for what they did on January 6th. I mean, this is an unfathomable
Well, it is.
level.
It's just an awful,
It's
disgraceful.
corruption. It's nothing.
Everything Trump has done in his own interest has been awful. He just makes policy as if he was as if he was the king, as a lot
Well,
of liberals say.
well, see, it's not, there's a kind of these protests that are kind of named after that exact objection. But
Well, yeah,
so what did you want to talk about, Professor Sabrin, about
make it
Sabrin,
Sabrin.
Sabrin? Well,
yeah, he's
what did
going
you,
nuts.
Sabrin, Professor Sabrin, what did you want to tell us about the explosion of the debt and the deficit?
Well, I got my iPad here on the right side, your left side, and there's a wonderful website called usadebtclock.org, which I urge everyone to go to because it shows you in real time the increase in the national debt and spending. And right now, we're increasing the national debt by about $100,000 every 5 seconds. I mean, it's mind-boggling how the federal government is spending money it doesn't have, and the deficit right now for this fiscal year, which ends September 30th, is just shy under $1.7 trillion. So again, to get to your point, the Republicans have never been fiscal conservatives. The last fiscally conservative Republican we've had was Dwight Eisenhower, because there was balanced budgets throughout the 1950s. There was hardly any deficit spending. And for a military guy, he really understood federal finances better than any of the presidents since then, because he kept a tight ship on spending, even on the military side.
And
He kept a tight
you know
ship.
who was right there at his elbow who committed to working with him throughout his entire term? The Speaker of the House and the Majority Leader in the Senate, who were both Democrats, who
Yeah,
decided that the country liked Eisenhower, and that's why they started the space program and they did the Highway Administration, two of the best federal programs ever. And the budgets were reasonable. Everybody regarded those times as pretty good times, fiscally sane times. And that kind of went on until I think, frankly, we just became enamored of war.
well, it
Beginning in
was,
Vietnam, we blew our budgets. A
yeah.
lot of it was spent on wars.
The
And
turning points, Paul, were the Great Depression when we got the FDR New Deal, even though the New Deal really began under Hoover. And you got Social Security and all these other alphabet soup agencies. Then you get the Great Society programs, and you blow up the commitment of the federal government to welfare spending in ways that FDR couldn't even imagine. And you get two programs that are critical for the undermining of our healthcare system, Medicare and Medicaid. And so in the 50s, it was pretty calm. Social Security was a minuscule part of the federal budget. It was in its infancy. And people were predicting that Social Security will have a crisis. And they did in the late 70s, early 80s. And we got tax hikes to quote bail out Social Security. Now we know the Social Security Trust Fund is going under. There'll be not enough money in there by 2032, which is not that far away. And they're talking about either cutting back on benefits or raising the threshold for taxable income for Social Security, for payroll taxes. So we've got a commitment by the federal government, which has never been matched by the revenue in order to pay for that. It's all been done through basic deficit spending. And that is a prescription historically for financial crises. And we've
well,
seen this in country after country after country. What's keeping the US economy afloat right now is the demand for US dollars by foreigners who buy our treasuries, and the fact that the US dollar is a reserve currency, which makes a lot of commodities bought and sold in dollars. So therefore, there's a demand for dollars. If that demand goes away, this whole house of cards collapses. And I think it's going to happen by the early 30s, if not sooner, because all the indications are how many $2 trillion deficits can you run consecutively without foreigners saying, we don't want any more of your debt? And then the
Here's a
Federal
question,
Reserve,
a question
and
related to that for both of you. Who do you think is going to win the midterms and by how much?
well, this is I think something that people are starting to try to get a handle on, because the Republicans have been able to successfully redistrict states to give them more so-called Republican seats in the House. But the question is, what will the economy look like in September and October when people start doing the mail-in ballots and early voting, and then going to the polls in November? If the economy is tanking, if inflation is spiking, I mean, there may be even safe Republican seats that go to the Democrats, and the toss-up seats will definitely go to the Democrats. And so you could see a really wipeout. Remember, 1966, right after we went into Vietnam and the Great Society program started to kick in, the Republicans picked up 47 seats in the midterms in 1966. That was a huge increase for the Republicans. The Democrats, I don't think they can come anywhere near 47. If they come with a dozen or even 10 seats, that would swing it to them. And the Senate, if you get Texas going Democrat, uh, Maine is off the board now because the Democrats have picked a guy that has SWAT stickers on his tattoos or something like that, and now there's a sexting scandal with him. So I think the Democrats thought they would.
So what's your prediction for who's going to win?
Well, I think the Democrats, based upon what we know now and what probably will happen in the fall, I think the Democrats should pick up 10 seats in the House. That's what I think will happen right now. If things
Now,
get
what's your
No,
number?
I'm calling it a wave this fall. I think the country's had enough. There's a saying, I didn't tell the audience this, but they may know this. I was a county leader in the Democratic Party for 4 years in Morris County, back when there were almost no Democratic elected officials in Morris County. I used to joke that I was the negative Polaroid image of the Hudson County Democratic chairman. So he would stand up and talk about what happened in elections, and I would talk about what happened in elections, and it was basically the opposite. But I do have the scars to show that I was in politics for a while, and for a little while at least, I was in some rooms and played the game at a fairly high level. There's a saying in politics, which is you don't scare the horses. You never want to do things that scare the horses. And when there's too much crazy in the atmosphere, you scare the horses. And people just are frightened, and it's one crazy thing after another. We're going to invade Greenland. We're going to
Yeah,
shoot torpedo boats off of Venezuela. We're going to invade Iran for no freaking reason.
and Cuba.
And then we're going to maybe Cuba, we're going to claim victory when we reopen the Strait of Hormuz, which was open before we attacked Iran with no plan whatsoever. Domestically, we've got inflation rising, gas prices skyrocketing. I don't know how many more issues can go wrong. Uh, and the president basically just has to keep reading people the story that the emperor has no clothes, and they have to just keep saying it's all wonderful, and he doesn't tolerate any dissent. Republicans who challenge him get wiped out in the Republican primary. I think not only is this going to be a wave election, I think it's going to be a turning point for the Republican Party and probably for the Democratic Party too. I think we're going to see something new come out of this. I think the Democratic Party will do extremely well, but they'll really have a wave if they can muster the internal fortitude to welcome into the Democratic Party everyone, liberal and conservative, who supports the Constitution of the United States. Because there's many disaffected Republicans, people like George Will, Anthony Scaramucci, Adam Kinzinger, uh, uh, the former vice president's daughter, Liz Cheney, many very conservative Republicans who have left the party or been driven out of the party by Donald Trump, and they should be voting with the Democrats or even declaring themselves Democrats. The only thing we have to overcome on the Democratic side is purity tests. If we could welcome
Well,
everybody.
what hurts the Democrats is a lot of loony programs like gender equity, call them men calling themselves women so they can compete.
Well,
That stuff
that's
they
the
can't
only
resist that stuff.
that's the only thing the Republicans have to talk about is
What, the only thing?
transgender athletes. At this point, the economy's a
No, that
disaster.
was a big victory. And for that Trump is getting rid of this stuff, and he should be tooting his own whistle more because
Yeah, but
that's
it truthfully,
and same thing with redistricting. I mean, you can't. It was racially based. It was racial discrimination. And I can remember an election, I forget which one, in New Jersey, where I overheard a couple of Republican leaders talk about how they've got to bring in action under the Civil Rights Act to protest the districts. And I'm like, wait a minute, the Republicans are advocating the Civil Rights Act? Well, not really, but it's this crazy logic where you take two black people here, three white people there, throw in a couple Hispanics, and that's just nuts.
well,
And it's
leaving.
racial discrimination.
Well, no, you have to even if you leave race out of it and you just look at what's going on in the Republican Party, They keep trying to win elections and dominate the House of Representatives with a minority of the vote by moving districts around, and eventually it catches up with you.
If you leave race out of it, there goes the Democrats. There's two things they talk about. One is race, and the other is gender, and that's
Oh,
all they talk about. They don't
another
say
Well,
big
anything
issue,
else.
another big issue that Trump and the Republicans should jump on is this concept of a wealth tax, because once you
Yeah,
start the wealth tax, it's going to trickle down to where you have $1 million and they'll tax you on your wealth. You start at 5 billion. New York City, I mean, the guy is really crazy. He wants to tax people with a $5 million residence who don't live in the city full time. Well, they're not using city services. And besides, and this is the big thing with the property tax that really gets me. Such a disconnect between the taxes you pay and the so-called benefits you receive. And what if you don't want those so-called government benefits? You still have to pay for them. This is the problem with the public sector, is that you're forced to pay for things that you don't want. And
well,
that's why one of the best articles, which was written decades ago, is Rothbard's essay, "The Fallacy of the Public Sector," which is March was the 100th anniversary of his birth. And it's probably one of his most important and neglected articles, because he shows that government spending is basically a scam. It's about who can get the most votes to pass a program for the people who are going to support them politically. It has nothing to do with the
Well,
well-being
it's
of the
got to do
people.
with what the majority wants. There's this concept called majority rules. And when the majority decides they need services and goods and they ask their government to provide them for them, and when people are informed by their collective morality that says we should have a decent regard for our fellow man, things start to happen that are in the common good. And we constantly have a debate about whether things are wasteful or bad or fraudulent. But the truth is, trying to accomplish things for the common good as determined by elective representatives,
is
it's not a
the
crazy idea.
Democratic Party is a jobs program. That's all it is. They just want to get as many jobs out there for willing Democrats. And they've got something like 40% of the populace, the voting public in New Jersey, has a public job. And when you
I didn't follow
Murphy,
that. You didn't mean to say Republican. You said Republican.
He said Democrat,
You
40%
meant,
of
oh,
them.
Democrats,
I think you were
yeah,
slinging an arrow at Democrats, not Republicans, but you
yeah,
said,
yeah. No, it's Republican Democrats rather, but they give Murphy was every time Murphy would have a project, he wouldn't say the common good, or he'd say this will create lots of jobs, and often he would say lots of jobs for public employee unions.
Yeah,
And as you know, Roosevelt said that there should not be public employee unions because they have a conflict of interest.
right.
They're hiring their own boss. And that's been proven more true than anything. And here in New Jersey, everybody, they're just all competing for the pork that
well,
our
I want to
Democratic
make
Party puts
I want to
out
make
there.
I want to pick up one point that Murray made, and I just want to say that I heard what you said about deficits and debt, and there's a fallacy that's gone unfulfilled, a prophecy that's gone unfulfilled since 1980, which is that you can change the funding mechanism and cut the revenue by adding tax cuts, and that's going to actually add to the revenue. And in fact, the Republican administrations have done two things that have dramatically increased the deficits and the debts to where we are now, outstripping all the Democratic administrations since 1980. The Republicans are the hands down winners, and the combination is tax cuts plus unfettered defense spending and unnecessary wars. If you look at Iraq, Afghanistan, and now we've got Iran, these things together are the true catastrophes that have added to our debt. And those things were based on the Laffer curve that never has been fulfilled. And they've always say, this is the time when it's going to work. And then they spend themselves into oblivion on defense spending every time, whether it's just regular old defense spending or because there's a new war that they've gotten us into. And it's always the war to end all wars, and
Well,
we'll
let
be
me.
graded with hearts and flowers, and it never works.
Well, Paul makes a point here, but he didn't expand upon it, and that's where the data come in. If you look at the federal spending since the Republicans took over the Congress with Newt Gingrich and the Contract for America, and
Okay, it's
Clinton was
92,
president,
right?
yeah,
1992. Okay.
yeah. Well, the Republicans took over in '95 when they won the majority in '94. But
Sorry.
if you look when you had a Democrat, this is what the data show, which is really remarkable. When you have a Democratic president and a Republican Congress, that's when fiscal responsibility is the greatest in the United States.
Interesting. Okay.
That's I'm looking at the chart now.
You have to have some civility and some spirit of compromise, and you have to have, you have to have competition and battling, but you have to be able to move the ball down the field for the good of the country. And we're kind of missing that today, wouldn't you say?
Well, getting back to what you said about the majority, you know what the majority is when two foxes and a hen vote on what to have for dinner. That's majority rule.
Okay. So, okay, so I had to fire that one last salvo. Forgive me, and I'll give you the last word on it. But I do want to now turn attention to the other subject we said we were going to talk about. And that is, well, the president took it in the chops from the courts on two fronts. One, he proposed a settlement of a frivolous lawsuit he filed. I'm characterizing it. It was a
Yeah.
frivolous lawsuit where he was suing the federal government for $10 billion, a number he picked out of the air, that any competent defense lawyer trying to fight would have been able to knock down immediately based upon his tax return having been illegally or negligently released by the IRS. So he picked a number out of the air and said that was worth $10 billion to him. Now, of course, I don't know what's in his tax returns still, and I don't know. So what happened? That was filed in a federal court, and before it had any discovery, and before anybody fired a shot in anger, lo and behold, the Justice Department decided to roll over on that and voluntarily dismissed the lawsuit. But then, using the docket number of the filing, they've settled the case with President Trump for $1.7 billion and said it was going to go into a weaponization fund that he would be able to control as he saw fit. He could distribute it to anybody but the Trump family, which would presumably mean he would be rewarding all of the people who participate in January 6th or who do things for him, where he pardons people and they do nasty, thuggish activities. That then it was accompanied by a one-page letter from the Attorney General, where he announced further that he, the Attorney General, Todd Blanche, was going to summarily determine that the President of the United States, forevermore, Donald Trump, would never, forever, and he actually put the word forever in capital letters, be immune from prosecution for tax fraud on any of his previous tax returns. Well, that didn't sit well with anybody. In fact, it sat so poorly even with Republican senators that they blocked it in the Senate. And they even blocked the reconciliation bill that was going to put the immigration law on the books that has been the subject of a government shutdown. And that was supposed to be a done deal, but then this latest truly crazy action came out of the White House. And just when everybody thought it was crazy but probably going to happen, 32 federal judges, retired, filed a lawsuit with the same district court judge asserting that this lawsuit and the settlement in its entirety constitute what lawyers called a fraud upon the court. That is, it was conceived as simply an artful device where the President of the United States could file a piece of paper and be on both sides of the lawsuit and direct his alter ego Attorney General, having surrendered all professional responsibility and the independence that Attorney Generals have always had, to some extent, limiting their willingness to do totally craven things. And the federal court judge put a hold on the $1.7 billion settlement.
Hold on just a second.
Yeah.
What does weaponization mean? I have no idea. I've been hearing weaponization being kicked around. What in that bill is even supposedly addressing weaponization? If you know, tell me.
My answer to that is if Trump uses a word and directs it as a criticism, it's because he's doing it himself. So There was no weaponization against Donald Trump. He committed a lot of crimes that were investigated, and he didn't get tried in time before Biden left office, or he
Now,
probably
whose
would.
fault was that? The Democrats took
Yeah, it was the
forever
dem it was
to indict
Merrick
him.
it was Merrick Garland's fault. It was Merrick Garland's fault. He didn't move quickly enough. He was too timid, and finally he appointed Jack Smith, who the clock ran out on him before he could put points on the scoreboard. But it was looking he had Trump indicted. But in any event, weaponization is a phrase that's used on the right. Trump supporters use it to describe Donald Trump being held to account for January 6th and Donald Trump being held to account for the way he treated women criminally in at least one case. And that's called weaponization. Now, it's in fact what
What's
weaponization is.
the
This
I mean,
weapon
I
is,
hate that kind of jargon. This is where you guys get yourselves in trouble. People
it's not
use a
my
phrase like
jargon.
that.
It's not my
People use
jargon.
a phrase like that as if it had meaning. Like it doesn't mean
It's,
weaponization, anti-weaponization. How
it's
does
Trump,
giving
it's Trump's
1.7
jargon.
trillion dollars away?
It's not my jargon. It's Donald Trump's jargon. He came up with the
No,
weaponization.
actually, it's been in use long before Donald Trump.
Well,
It's a political cliche that I never liked.
well,
And the problem is people will repeat, well, he weaponized. Yeah, he weaponized. The Democrat says he weaponized. The Republican says no, he weaponized.
Well, I
And
remember when Bill Clinton was impeached, people were saying that we had to avoid criminalizing politics, and that's I think kind of captures the essence of what evil we're trying to avoid. But when the current administration sets up a fund and starts calling it the anti-weaponization fund, so that he can pay off people he has already pardoned after they either pled guilty or were convicted, in many cases, of assaulting police officers, vandalizing the Capitol, illegally demonstrating in the Capitol, interfering with the operation of Congress on January 6th, lots of other obviously illegal behavior that nobody wants to see repeated. And then now he's going to have money to pay those people, and they're going to be very grateful to him. And the whole idea is that that's going to reward them for someone having improperly prosecuted them. It's got false premises from start to finish.
but it has nothing to do with weapons. It's just a bit of doggerel that politicians of both parties use because, well, weaponization is bad. Well, what, why? What is it? Does anybody, I mean, if you went out on the street and asked people what weaponization is, nobody would know.
It's a
They'd say, I
punchline.
don't know.
It's a talking point. If you'll notice in answering your question about what actually happened, I didn't use that word because I don't need to use that word to describe the behavior and the conduct and what is wrong with what's going on here. We have laws and we have them enforced when people break them. We don't use the law to find things that people did wrong and define things so that we can prosecute them. We wait for them to break the law and then hold them to account. And
Like in Russiagate.
like in
Russiagate. When the minute Trump came into office, they tried that on him, and it was nonsense.
a lot of people were convicted in those cases. And there were real convictions in those cases.
Convictions for what? A lot of people were later pardoned.
A
Who
lot
was
of people were
convicted?
pardoned by Trump later on.
Who
But I
was
mean,
convicted and for what?
well, I don't have all of the figures right in front of me to answer that precise question.
But
But
everybody, the New York Times, I think, got a Pulitzer for writing about the Russia, and it was a hoax. The
it was not a
idea,
hoax. Well, that's like saying weaponization.
well,
To say
look,
it's a hoax is like saying weaponization. That's just a punchline.
no, it was a hoax because
It's not a hoax.
it was a hoax because the premise was that if a foreign country spends money in our elections, you impeach the president, which is just that it's not a hoax, it's crazy.
Well,
Everybody, do you know how much money we spent influencing elections? And when I used to go down to Central America, the CIA was buying all the. Why do you think Duarte was president of El Salvador? Because we bought it for him. And this idea that somehow the government can't use its money to get a favorable outcome in a foreign election.
so the idea that Russia can participate in our elections by invading the internet and sending out tens of millions of memes to
Well,
overwhelm our
invading
social media.
Ukraine happened before that, but
But
Well,
see, there's two different things you're
they went
conflating.
after Trump on pure nonsense.
It's not nonsense. It may not be. It may
It
be a
was nonsense. What did they? What did Trump do? I mean, when they went him the first court martial, not court martial, the first trial,
first
what was
impeachment.
he accused of doing? They just
Try,
like ran it up, and they didn't have the votes.
trying
Yeah,
to
for this
extort the
impeachment.
president of Ukraine,
Trying to what?
extort the president of Ukraine
They
in
didn't
exchange for
extort him.
javelin missiles,
Just
hostage.
like with us in El Salvador, he of his own free will went for the money. It didn't extort him. That they said, "Hey, here's a great job. It's a jobs program."
I don't know
Again,
what we're talking about in El Salvador. I didn't get that point. I'm sorry,
well,
Paul.
I did, and we spent a lot of money in El Salvador influencing the elections.
Oh,
And
okay. Okay. I see your
if that
point.
was such a
In
horrible
other words,
thing, why did
here's
we do it under Democratic presidents?
well, I'm not defending that. I'm saying I don't want Russia invading our elections and chalking it up to everybody does it. And I think
Paul,
It's
if
not up to
Paul,
everybody does it. That's a legitimate foreign policy tool. Why shouldn't you be getting fined?
you're defending Russia doing that. I
No, I'm
don't think we
defending the
should
United States.
I don't think we
I'm
should want
defending
Russia to,
anybody doing it who is not in the United, they're not breaking an American law. I mean, America loves to chase and
well,
pass these
there's
laws.
two different things. One is, does it have a legal consequence? You seem to be arguing it shouldn't because it's fair game. It's
Well,
just
it didn't have a legal consequence. It was
it's just international politics, and that's fair game. And
yes, exactly.
well,
And then
you
you're
and I
pushing it around
disagree
for
on that.
something to impeach Trump on. And getting the, I mean, if anybody should have been jailed for that, it was Hunter Biden. What he was doing, do you think Hunter Biden knows the first thing about natural gas? Yet he
Well,
was making what,
he
800,000 a
wasn't
year?
the yeah he never got to be the president of the United States. And
But you can buy the president by buying his son, which is what they did. It's
well,
pretty simple.
his father was the vice president at the time of those allegations, not the
Vice
president.
president, yeah.
So
They bought the vice
what do you
president.
think, Murray? What do you think?
well, if you recall in the 90s, there were allegations that Chinese government money was influencing the election to help Clinton get elected. I don't know if you remember that. There were all sorts of allegations, I think, in the 96 campaign, because the 92 campaign, it was very fluid as to who would win, given that you had Perot in the mix. You also had Perot in the mix in 96, but he was a marginal,
Yeah, that's
relatively
true.
speaking, to 92. But the point is,
I'm against it.
we now have the Israeli government influencing the president of the United States. You have APAC, which should be registered as a foreign agent. As Tom Massey said in an interview with Tucker Carlson, APAC has an individual assigned to every congressman to make sure they vote correctly on the issues related to Israel's
Well,
aid and things like that.
good point. Paul, what do you think about that? Is that acceptable for Israel to be doing that? Or is it, you think that's acceptable, like just international politics?
APAC to get all involved in our politics?
Yeah.
It's a joke to ask if it's acceptable. It's the rule. Menendez, remember when Menendez went to the APAC convention and sucked up, and all of a sudden he got, I don't know, 5 million for his
Well,
defense
I
fund.
mean, Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, Conservative, I think if you ask most people in the United States, they don't want foreign countries involved in meddling in our elections. And if you're saying
You're going to tell that to
it's
the Israelis? Good luck.
well, you're saying it happens anyway. It's an aspect of their
I'm saying they were searching around for something to go after Trump on, and they almost threw him in jail, and now he's getting his revenge. So, yeah,
Adam
revenge
Schiff,
is
when he was a
sweet.
congressman, he would go on Meet the Press and all the other Sunday talk shows for 2 years saying, I've seen the goods on Trump. We've got the goods left and right on Trump for 2 years. I mean, this guy was just blowing smoke at the American people, and the media were eating it up. And
Who
I'm
is
not
that
a
you're
big
talking about?
Adam Schiff, who's now a senator from California.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I mean, he was all over the media saying, "Hey, we got it. We're going to get it."
I think at least when it came to January 6th, we would have all been better off. We're on the second impeachment now, but if he had been convicted, we'd all be better off than if
The second impeachment, they should have convicted him.
And
How guilty can you be?
Mitch McConnell basically plunged the country into what we're going through now. The last issue we have, gentlemen, is the renaming of the Kennedy Center, which is a classic example of the president overextending his authority, and then a federal judge has said he's got to take the Trump name off the building and reopen it. He closed it for 2 years because apparently his artistic control led to nobody willing to perform there.
Yeah.
So, kind of like the party he's got scheduled for the White House lawn on the 4th of July.
And the ballroom as well.
And the, what is it, a UFC fight? And
Yeah.
it's just a professional wrestling match or whatever it is. Maybe it's lions and tigers and bears. I don't know, but none of it makes me burst with pride for being an American. I will tell you one story. Last summer, I was on the 4th of July, on the 250th anniversary of Lafayette's visit to the United States, first visit, and I was in Paris and I took the train out and I visited Lafayette's grave on the 4th of July. And I got there and there was me and there were two other Americans and the place was deserted. And I said, what's going on here? And I have pictures of the nice clerk there. And I was there on a French immersion course and I used my middling French, poor French, but I got through and he explained to me that, oh, well, it was about 10 days ago they had a little ceremony here. And that's because you know who our ambassador to France is? Charles Kushner.
Mm.
He's like a national disgrace. And don't think the French don't know every aspect of his history and how we sent him as the ambassador to, France, one of the greatest countries in the world, and how we are here. And our president is adding his name to the Kennedy Center, which is literally a memorial to the dead president. What do you
Yeah.
guys
Yeah.
think?
As I've told Paul and other people on many occasions, Trump views the federal government as the Trump organization, and he views himself as the chairman of the board of American business. And that's why he has all these CEOs sucking up to him and inviting him to the White House. This is what historical example. This is what Hoover did during from 29 to 32. He corralled all the members of the big businesses to come and do his bidding in terms of policy. Trump is the same way. He was in charge of the Trump organization, and he thinks the federal government is his fiefdom. And with the Trump bonds, the Trump RX, I mean, everything he wants to put his name on it.
A
And
$250 bill?
yeah, this goes back from what I read. I think he was at the ceremony of the dedication of the Verrazano Bridge in 1964, I think it was. And Trump and I are the same age, so he was 18 years old at the time. And I guess he realized that time that he wants to have his name on everything that he builds. And that's exactly what he's done with his real estate and his casinos, which are no longer his.
Oh, don't forget the Arch de Trump, which is
Yeah,
coming, right?
yeah. I mean, the guy has an ego that is bigger than the universe, if that's possible. And I was never a Trump admirer. I've never was a Trump supporter. I think he was the grievance candidate in 2016. He started off by talking about immigration. He must have had some focus group or something or his advisors saying that immigration is going to be the hot issue, and he wrote that to the primary and the presidency. So politically, you got to give the guy a lot of credit.
Well, Paul Mulshine called it.
Yeah. Well, a week before the election, I was on a
called
radio.
it early.
Yeah, but a week before the election, when everyone thought Hillary Clinton was going to win by 10 points, I said, it looks like the momentum is in Trump's favor and he should win the election. And by the way, I watched the election night results all night till about 3 a.m. in the morning. And when they announced that Trump won, he came out and I looked at his body language and his facial expression. He didn't think he was going to win.
He was shocked.
He was shocked. And that's why his first administration was, I think, a disaster, because he didn't bring in competent people. I don't know how he decided to bring in the people that he did, but it was a revolving door his first term.
But also the Democrats have to accept responsibility for Trump because they put up two such weak candidates. I mean, I saw Hillary the last night of the 16 campaign speaking at Independence Mall in Philadelphia,
With
and it
Bruce
was really
Springsteen, I
something.
remember that.
Yeah, it was really something. Obama gave this like introduction, but I expected him to say, and now the next president of the United States, Hillary, and he just like says, sort of dropped the mic. I mean, there was no, and then um, Bill gave a great little yuck it up speech, but it had nothing to do with Hillary. I mean, the guy, both of them were awful candidates, and in both cases, the Democrats are afraid to put up a ticket with two men on it. That just
Yep.
drives them nuts. And this guy and they'll do it again. These are weak candidates. I mean, can you name a female candidate who could win next time? Certainly not
Uh,
Kamala.
okay, I think Gretchen Whitmer. I
She
think,
dropped out.
but I mean, Gretchen Whitmer is the governor of Michigan. She's a
Yeah,
form.
she dropped out.
She'd be a formidable. She would be a formidable candidate. I think Amy Klobuchar is a formidable candidate.
She's running for governor.
Well, what I'm saying, you asked me, is the women on the Democratic bench, are there women who could carry this forward? Um, I think uh,
Well, I saw Klobuchar in 2016 in the New Hampshire primary debates, and she was really good. And then,
she's tough and she's smart.
but when it came to the actual vote, Biden was running like seventh in a field of six. I mean, it was like he
Yeah,
was just out of it.
He went
And
into South Carolina
yeah.
and
That's
the
it.
party leaders, what's his name, down in
yeah,
they just
Primer.
decided they
Yeah.
wanted Biden, and the public, they had Buttigieg, who's a much more rounded candidate than you know Hillary, and then Biden. But they just Biden's our old friend. Let's put him in. And I mean, he was an awful candidate and an awful president. I mean, can you remember anything positive he did? Murray certainly can't.
No, no,
well,
no.
nothing you would think was positive, but the infrastructure bill was a good bill, and those bridges and
Anybody can
roads
do that.
are happening, and Trump is taking credit for them. But so all across the country, those things are happening, and that was a good law and a good piece of legislation. Just like we had a great Iran deal that Trump scrapped on the nuclear side, and he's gotten us into the war. Well, gentlemen, I think we have squeezed all the juice out of the orange for today. So, thank you, Professor Sabrin,
Sabrin.
Amen.
at Sabrin, once again. And thank you, Paul Mulshine. This is Paul Bangiola, and this is a wrap for Three Blowhards, No Waiting. Thank you.